your chosen life adventure. Are there any additional items for the agenda? I don't have any additional items, but I do want to state for the record that my quote in the paper was actually never said by anyone. I went back and watched the video, and nobody even said it, so I'm just stating that for the record, that that quote was not said by anybody in the paper.
Don't know what you're talking about.
So I don't know if you read the minutes from our last board meeting, so
Sorry.
that's what I'm talking about. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve.
That's Tim Burke. Do we have a second?
A second.
That's Joni Olson. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carries 5-0. All right, recognition of visitors and open forum. Marlene's here. I don't know that we have nobody's scheduled to speak, right? Okay.
Nobody.
And,
other
well,
than
Casey's here to speak on, yep.
As part of the agenda.
Yep. 6, reports and presentations, superintendent report.
Just a few updates that I have is, safe routes to school. I've been talking with Clinton about that, about the trail that's supposed to go by the baseball field out to Nelson Court. Jason Femeral is the the engineer. He is out on vacation, so hopefully Clinton gets me an update either tomorrow or Wednesday on where they are with that. I'd like to see that project done this summer, so it can be, we've moved the fence and done everything on our part. We're just waiting for them to get going on it. Once they get going, it shouldn't take long for them to complete the project. Juneteenth, new holiday. We followed guidance from MSBA on it, so all full-time employee, all 12-month hourly full-time employees and salaried employees will have Juneteenth off. We are still gonna run our SAC program as a necessity. So we'll be looking at that into the future, and then we'll also be adding Juneteenth to all of the contracts when we start negotiations later this summer or early fall. Just wanted to make you aware that with heydays in town, the carnival will be using our activities parking lot. And then when they get ready to leave on Sunday, you'll probably see some additional vehicles down there. Our history trip leaves on Sunday, and they've gotten permission to use the activities complex parking lot while they're gone. They can just leave their vehicles in there. They know they're responsible for anything in their vehicle, or if anything happens, that's on them. Just so you're aware of that. We have 2 new dishwashers being installed in the cafeteria. That project will be starting next week, so they'll be here next week with that equipment. They're figuring it's a 2-week project, 1 week in the kitchen and then 1 week in the dishwashing room. So that should be hopefully done by the end of June. Spring sports are finishing up. We've had a great spring sports season, anywhere from softball to baseball to track was at state last week. They did fabulous there. This week we have golf at state. So we have 7 participants, 6 on a boys team, and then we have 1 girl that's participating individually at state golf. So on a side note, I will be at state golf tomorrow, so if you need me, just call my cell phone. On Wednesday, last board meeting, we voted to add a wall in the media center. So on Wednesday, the construction will be here, fine-tuning everything, making sure everybody's on the same page, and then getting started with the wall here in the media center. Last Tuesday it was, Community Ed and Preschool held a preschool extravaganza. We had a bounce house, slushies, different games for all of the kids and different organizations for families to talk with and meet with. We had a great turnout. I think there were 27 families that showed up. So that went very well. Talking with Andrea today, we're seeing an increase in our numbers. We have 30, did she say 32? Something like that in our 4-year-old afternoons. So, that are signed up already now. So that's a great thing. Tonight we'll be talking, as part of the consent agenda, our new business manager. We're bringing forward Wendy Diker for that. However, I want to talk a little bit about Wendy's position as a district operations coordinator. We've had discussions about this in the past of, do we need an HR? How do we want to work this and whatnot? So, working with both Wendy and Matt on this, what we've done is we've reached out to 2 different organizations. One of them is Clifton Larson Allen. The other one is called SMS. I can't remember what it stands for.
School Management Services.
There you go, School Management Services. And what we've done is just talk to them about some different possible opportunities to have them come in and take over some of those roles that Wendy was doing, specifically payroll, because that takes a large chunk of her time. And then if we were to do that, we're still working on getting numbers for it from SMS. Clifton Larson Allen came back with numbers this afternoon for us. So, but looking at, is there a way we can do that and house HR within the building ourselves as part of that role of the district operations coordinator? With Wendy's switching from district operation coordinator to business manager, the district is saving a significant amount of money just because of she doesn't have the experience Matt has. Eventually she'll get there. However, that would be a way to offset that cost for this other organization coming in. Like I said, I don't have final numbers yet of what that could possibly cost, but it is something we're looking into prior to posting that position. And then the other is just trying to get through all of the bills that were settled with the legislature a couple weeks ago. So going through all of that, figuring out what we have to do and how we have to make changes. One big one that we'll be starting, or there's 2 big ones we'll be starting. One is the Minnesota MTSS framework. So it's the Minnesota Tiered Support Systems for Schools. The other one is going to be literacy. So there's special programs we have to go through before adopting literacy programs or literacy curriculum that came through the state legislature this year. So there'll be more information about that as it comes out. And then the final thing is, I think it was Friday morning? Yes, Friday morning, I received a call from Mike Bearding that there was a global data breach from MDE that affected a large number of students. We have not gotten any information that it affected JWP, but it did affect approximately 95,000 student names. So, but that's something we'll be looking into to see if we had any data breach from that. So, any questions at this point?
So by removing payroll, you're hoping to fold in more HR responsibilities for the coordinator?
Yep. So, be more of an administrative assistant, HR, because payroll's
Specialist, so
about,
to speak.
yeah, because payroll's about close to 50% of her time right now. we went, SMS does payroll and HR for the Waterville School District. And then, Matt did some more searching and found Clifton, Larson, Allen as a possibility also.
Any other questions?
So it's assumed that until we determine that, Wendy will be keeping that role as well as taking on business manager.
We'll be working together. We can also reach out to the region and they'll help us with payroll if need be until we figure out how we want to do this.
How long did both those companies take before they could be?
They could be on board by July 1st or at least by July 15th, which would be our first payroll into the next year.
Good questions.
Yeah, and thankfully the first couple payrolls are light because we've already done summer payoffs, so really it's just the admin staff and some of the, the hourly employees that get paid over the summer, but it's, as far as volume goes, it's a pretty light payroll those first couple, so.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, 6B, QComp report.
Okay, at the end of each year, by June 15th, we need to give a school board presentation or a report on how QComp went this year. So Casey's here tonight to give QComp year-end report.
So first off, hi. I haven't presented to this new board yet. My name is Casey Rose. I'm your Director of Teaching and Learning here at JWP. So a decent chunk of QComp is stuff that I oversee and work with your staff on, which is why I'm giving the report. So we'll go ahead and kind of get started with that. So the first thing I kind of want to go over is what is QComp, just because we have a lot of new people on the board, and you might not know what QComp is. So that first definition is the official MDE website definition of QComp, which is fun. But in a nutshell, our QComp program is focused on improving our teachers' craft, whatever that means within their context. How do we help them grow as professionals and individuals to help support all kids in the classroom? And there are a bunch of different pillars of QComp and a bunch of different things we look at. These include things like growth goals. Their formal observations that are done by the principals fall under here. They do peer observations, PLCs, those sort of things. So anytime you're talking about staff and staff growth for our teachers, it typically will fall under this umbrella of QComp. But it's a program by the state that really just looks at supporting and improving our staff and helping them grow from where they're at. So the first thing we're going to kind of talk about are the three types of goals that get set for QComp. These goals are kind of what we use to determine how, what your staff wants to work on throughout the year and how they want to measure their growth. So the first thing is our school-wide growth goal. This is also sometimes called our site goal. Those two things get used interchangeably, but basically what happens is I will meet with the principal for the building and we will look through their data and choose whichever standardized test we would like to work on improving. The state has very specific requirements within our school goal and our school goal. It has to be based on a standardized assessment. You have to write it and submit it to the state by a certain deadline, and then they approve whether or not you can use it. So the school-wide goal is there's a very specific, like, you got to do this sort of thing. It's always tied to some sort of standardized test. But I sit with our principals and we decide that for the building. So that's goal one. The second goal we work on are the professional growth goals. These are, I sit down with each individual teacher and we go through, what do you want to work on? What is something within your practice that you want to be better at? For some of our teachers, this is things like, all of my activities are all on paper and I want to digitize them so I can put them in Google Classroom. Okay, let's work on that. Some of our teachers, their professional growth goal are things like, I know our kindergarten, it was our kindergarten staff. A couple of our kindergarten staff this year did a book study on mindfulness practices within young elementary. So they chose a book. I think they actually did 2 books, now that I'm thinking about it, around that topic, read it, applied it, reflected on how that helped with their practice, those sort of things. So those things all fall under their professional growth goal. And then the last growth goal the teacher set is a student growth goal. Again, I work with them to kind of figure this out. Student growth goal is usually measuring the outcome of students in some way, shape, or form. So this might be something, I know our high school science teachers were looking at how students draw scientific models within science class, because usually when they start, it's rough. And so how are we changing our instruction to help them get better at that modeling process? This might be something like by the end of so for our pre-K staff, by the end of the year, they wanted all their kids to be able to write their name. Okay, that's like an outcome product for their students. So those are the 3 types of goals that our teachers set at the beginning of the year, and these are the things that I work with them on through coaching every month. So every month I meet with every staff and we look at, okay, how are you doing on your goals? How are you doing on implementing these things? What's going well? What's not going well? And we kind of work through that and keep troubleshooting each month and keep watching and monitoring our progress for that. So how did we do this year? At the elementary side, we met our site goal, which is awesome. So their goal was to have equal to or more than 70% students in grades 2 through 6, it being in that low risk and college readiness categories on the FastBridge reading assessment. So we ended with 71% of our students were at or above that benchmark, which means 71% of our students were doing good. We're less worried now because they're kind of in the clear a little bit on that. So they did a great job. At the elementary level, 100% of staff met their professional goals and 71% of staff met their student growth goals. Now within that, I can tell you we had so many staff that were like, one kid, one question away. At the elementary, a lot of the staff set their student growth goals related to that the FastBridge test and like specific subsets of it. So specifically looking at fluency. Like I want all my kids to be in this reading range for fluency, and they were like one kid off. And so I know 71%, but I can tell you a lot of our staff were so close in that. So they did a really good job. At the secondary level, we met the site goal question mark. Okay, here's me being really honest. I was like a week and a half into my position when I helped them write the site goals, and our high school site goal doesn't make sense, but the state approved it. So the state approved it, so that's good. We wrote this as we were going to increase the FastBridge for the 10th grade FastBridge by 2% to 55.5%. That doesn't make sense with how FastBridge is scored, which I didn't know because I come from Mankato where we do NWEAs. We don't do FastBridge. So in the schema of writing this, I was like, yeah, that makes sense that we would. My bad, I will do better. I now know how FastBridge works, how the stuff breaks down. Additionally, this was the first year 10th grade took FastBridge, so we didn't have data from previously. So we did great going from 0% to 67%. I will do better next year, I apologize. But I still pulled all the data for FastBridge. We were at 67% of 7th through 10th grade students were at or above benchmark in A reading for their spring assessment. So we're still doing pretty decent, especially if the goal was 55. But so that's kind of where they ended in that test range. On the professional growth goal side, again, 100% of our staff met their professional growth goals, 68% met their student growth goals. Again, with these, it was some of our goals, again, were within like 1 or 2 kids. Like we just got so close on some of them, but I think that means we're writing good goals, right? You don't want to smash it out of the park every time, because if you did, you didn't write a challenging enough goal. So that's where we ended with that. One side note, we did have a staff that will not be receiving QComp this year due to missed deadlines for a bunch of other components. There are very specific deadlines along the way we have to meet because of the state requirements and those sort of things, and they just missed deadlines despite several reminders. But that's so those are kind of our numbers for this year. And so then some changes moving forward. It's always good to look at your program and evaluate it. We are planning this summer to actually evaluate the program and the process in partnership with the teachers union. The teachers union has to sign off on agreement with all the components of QComp. In our initial application for QComp, that we sent into the state was in 2015-16. There were some updates in 2020, just because of COVID, and most of those were about like doing peer observations and things, which did not happen, but those were not permanent updates. We haven't updated it since then. So really, we haven't made any like major updates or adjustments at all on the state side. I had them pull like, hey, do you guys have it? And they're like, no. So the application or the form we are working out of is the 1516. We have changed a lot as a district since then, just in straight up like breakdown of how people are meeting, my position, like there's just a whole bunch of things that have changed logistically, and it's just always good to reevaluate. So we'll be doing some of that because it's been so long since we've done any of this, and we want to make sure we have the best program that supports the teachers in the system we have right now. So we're going to be doing that. We're going to continue and adjust weekly PLC meetings focused on instruction and data-driven decisions. We really want to start emphasizing some tier 1 interventions within that PLC work, and that circles back to the Minnesota MTSS that Jeremy was talking about at the beginning. This is part of that program, so we really want to make sure we give our teachers time and space to do that. We want to make sure we are looking at academic standards and standards alignment and how we assess standards in the classroom. It's great to give your assessment, but if your assessment doesn't align with your standards, that's a problem. And so like being able to have those discussions and sit down and really look at what we're doing and why we're doing it and how we're doing it to get a real true picture of what our kids do and don't know is going to be the goals for PLC this year. And the last thing kind of on my docket of things is building a more robust mentoring and onboarding program. Making sure that we have all the best supports we can for our new staff. Currently, we're not bringing in 16 new staff for next year, so whoop, improvements. But making sure those staff we do bring in, some of them are fresh new baby teachers and some of them have a lot of experience. They're gonna need different things. Making sure we have a program available to them that support them in every way we need to, and creating that support network for them is going to be our goal of our mentoring program. So just kind of reevaluating that, looking at what we want that to be and how to best support our new staff is also kind of on my docket of things that fall under QComp. So.
Question, Casey.
Yes, sir.
So, and if this isn't the time to ask that, no problem, but remind me how the principal, right, because the teachers ultimately report to the principal.
Correct.
So how do you and the principal, elementary, high school interact, that if the principal has certain growth that a certain teacher needs to make,
Yes.
how is he making that known to you so that those, objectives or the professional growth are actually tied into what
What they're
the
doing.
manager is looking for out of them?
Right, so typically those concerns will come out of their formal observations for the teachers. Typically, like once the principal goes in and sees it, and they're like, oh, red flag. The principals will then, when in their post-observation meeting with the staff, will let the staff know like, hey, I want you to work on this and I want you to work on it with Casey. It is on the staff and the principal to coordinate with each other about making sure that I get looped in, because I am not allowed to know what is happening in the observations. Like, I can't access the staff's formal observations. I don't have an administrative license, so I am not privy to what gets done in observations. However, if one of the principals comes to a staff and is like, I want you to work with Casey, and the staff says, okay, and then the principal comes and talks to me and is like, hey, then I can work on setting that up. And so that is kind of between the principal and the staff themselves about like making sure that that is initially followed through on as far as filling me in that. If an observation doesn't go well and a staff knows that and we're in a regular coaching session, I'm like, hey, I know your observation came up, you want to share? And they're like, everything was great. And they don't tell me anything. I can't like pry. So that either needs to be told to me from the staff or told to me from the principal. Currently, I haven't had anybody with that I'm aware of, so that's a win. But that is how that would work out. But I can't like just access their form that got filled out and like read it and be like, oh, these things. That's just not how we have it set up right now.
Okay, thank you, Casey.
Is that everything on the?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions or anything anybody has? All right, thanks for sharing that. All right, 6C, budget information, enrollment update and historical cash balances.
Enrollment, like we know, it is fluid. We were down one student when it came end of the year time. So, other than that, cash data, Matt, you can, or historical cash balances, you can talk about that.
Sure. I think I've mentioned this before, but right now, as we get ready for summer payoffs, normally the calendar's kind of set up where we're growing in our cash balance right now, and when we look in July, it'll be down again. So you can see that pretty consistent dip every year that happens. So, but we've allowed. I mean, the way I set up our investments is to allow for that fluctuation. So. All part of the plan.
Any questions anyone has? All right, 6D, committee reports. We had a finance committee meeting, but we're pretty much going through all of it here with the budget presentation. I don't know if there was anything additional on there that we're not gonna see tonight with that. Unless I'm forgetting something.
No, I think should be all in tonight's budget presentation.
Yeah. Any question, well, you'll see it in that, we can ask questions at that time. So 7, approval of the consent agenda. As always, you're welcome to pull anything out that you wanna talk about separately. Just a reminder that the, policies are now part of the consent agenda, so if anybody wants to pull one of those out, we can. Are there any clarifying questions before we move on? All right, if not, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
That's Tim Burke. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
That's Joni Olson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carries 5-0. 8, old business. Approve agreement with Taher for food service management services for 2023-2024 school year pending state approval of the contract. Was there anything further you guys wanted to talk about?
We've met with Brett from Taher since we last met.
He's the gentleman.
He
that
was the
presented
gentleman
to
that was
us.
here. And just shouldn't say continued, but I would say we spent a majority of that meeting elaborating on what our concerns have been in the past. As far as other schools with Taher, I reached out to them, haven't heard much back about the concerns like we've had, so I don't know if it's here or if it's company overall, or if it's a difference of when Sarah was here and how things were being ran compared to how they're being ran now with Gary under Taher. So, it would be to go out back on our own would be a significant change for us. So I guess my recommendation at this point would be that we would stay with Taher for one more year. And then if they're not fulfilling the way Brett is telling us they will, then we, in December, we start looking at going out on our own.
Did Brent give you more assuredness that things will change and get better? And, you know, I happened to be at basketball this weekend and a mom shared that the kids pour a little bit of milk out to see whether it's good milk or not before they drink it. Is Brent assuring us that he's gonna make changes? Does he agree that changes need to be made?
He's in agreement that changes need to be made, and I would say that he is looking at ways to make these changes. Whether it's, like he talked about bringing a chef in at least once a month, or a couple times a year. I'd like to see him here once a month.
It's a little
but-
different.
Yeah,
It's like,
but
wow,
a couple
that's a
times a
win.
year,
Yeah.
rather than
Nice job, Jeremy.
once a year. But that's all they can give us for right now.
I get it. It doesn't seem as though we as a board have any other option but to approve and move forward. But I really would like to reinforce what we talked about at last meeting. If you want to set up a committee, if you
Yep.
want more people to be on board, if you need help holding their feet to the fire,
Yep.
we,
we-
you know,
Yeah, we did mention that to Brett, and he seemed like he would be on board with that,
Okay.
having a committee to work on that.
I think it'd be nice too, you know, everybody talks about chicken, you know, different options of chicken every week, like to actually go through every month and see how many different options that they shared. So we're tracking that versus just meals. You know, he showed us a slide of just meals served versus, you know, our options that we're getting, so they can see it in front of them.
in Spanish, my son said they actually kept track of what food was being served, and it was like all but 4 in one particular, you know, quarter was chicken.
Really?
I mean, they were literally putting tallies in Spanish. You know, it's just become kind of a bit of a joke. So I would make a motion to approve the agreement with Taher because I don't think we have any other option.
That's Kevin Bourne. Do we have a second?
A second.
That's Tim Burke. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carries 5-0. 8B, approve the addition of an elementary art teacher. Casey, are you presenting this too?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. So, this slideshow is kind of follow-up to a bunch of the questions and concerns you guys had in the previous meeting, so that's kind of what we're gonna see. So, one of the recommendations was, can we just add art to our elementary staff, right? Like technically, yes, they are licensed to teach it, so can we just add that? Some things to, I guess, keep in mind or look at. Their current classroom schedules are super packed. They are super packed. They have, all of the grades have a spot in there that is called content time. And that content time is roughly 20 minutes a day. That content time cycles through social studies and science. I know there was a question, I think it's first grade who has art in that content time, but Mondays is Scholastic Magazine, Tuesdays is social studies, Wednesdays is science, Thursday is art, and Friday is like free time day. And the art they're doing is more like craft time, right? Like we're gonna make Mother's Day cards this week, or we're gonna make fire trucks this week or whatever. It's not necessarily true art instruction. So be aware that in their schedules, that kind of 20 minutes of content time, we're already housing 2 of our core content areas in that 20 minutes. So they don't get social studies every day. They don't get science every day. They usually get one or the other. 6th grade is a little bit different because they're running a little closer to a middle school model, but that K-5, you know, they'll do 3-4 weeks of social studies for a unit and then switch over to science for a week or 2. And then they'll switch back to, and that's that 20 minutes a day. That's ultimately where this would end up falling if we kept it with them. Additionally, because we use a standards-based grading system in the elementary, we would need to utilize the specific art standards, their rubrics, their lessons, their assessments. All of those things would need to be written by our staff because we don't have them currently. Like there is no, hey, we're cutting the art position and here's the content. That they would just have to start from ground zero with all the art standards for their specific grades, which is a ton of work, but also a lot of our staff doesn't necessarily have the background in art. You know, they don't know the color wheel and complementary colors and how to use line and texture to create dimension. Like those are specific art standards that if you're not in the art world, that's a lot of like, so asking them to write, you know, the rubrics and the assessments and the lessons for content that could they teach? Probably yes. I mean, we have great elementary teachers, so could they teach it? Yes. Would they be super comfortable teaching it? Would they provide the same sort of wealth of knowledge as somebody with like an actual arts license? Probably not. It would be like me trying to teach social studies. I teach science as a background. I taught science for 10 years. You do not. Could I teach social studies? Yes. Do you want me to? Absolutely not. So there's that. And then workload for next year. This is actually going to be a huge one, which links into that one above it. This will be our 2nd year of truly doing Generation Genius, which is the curriculum we use for science and implementing those science standards. Year 1, they did a great job. It was bumpy, as it's going to be, because let's be honest, some of our staff hasn't had to teach a ton of science with this level of rigor. So we need to continue working on that for sure. That disaster that's happening over there, that's me sorting through all the science equipment and getting it ready for our elementary staff to like be able to just pull when they need it. So there's still a ton of science work. Additionally, Minnesota Bold Literacy Plan, you might know this as the READ Act. This was what Jeremy was talking about at the beginning, just got passed by our legislature. This thing is monstrous, I'm not gonna lie. I had a training on Thursday for an hour through MDE specifically, and then I had an additional training this morning. I watched what ended up being an hour and then another half an hour by some connections through the U of M and SCSC. This is going to be a big one. It is going to require a lot from our staff. It is a very large shift in literacy framework and how we teach kids to read. It is going to require a lot from our staff. It focuses mainly on the science of reading. Again, that Minnesota MTSS, which you guys are going to hear a ton from me about over the next year, because that's another huge thing. And then you may also be familiar with letters training. Letters training is one of the main companies that does the literacy program the way that Minnesota wants us essentially to be teaching our kids to read. We looked into letters training part of the way through this last school year. And because of the size, it would have, and when we like kind of really got the ball rolling into it, we couldn't complete the first half of it in a year. It's a 2-year program, so you complete half of it the entirety of the first school year, and then you complete half of it the entirety of the second school year, and it still requires a lot of additional time for our teachers even outside of the school year. It is a very large task. So knowing that those things are coming from the state and that we will be moving in these areas to then also be like, hey, and art, I would really love it if we didn't do that to our elementary staff. They will be, yeah, I would really like to not do that. So those would be kind of those are my concerns as far as like just adding it to, like, let's add it to their day. Those are kind of my big concerns at this point. Questions on that one?
So that kind of makes it seem as though the legislature is more focused on reading and math, or mainly, well, science and math more so than art. I mean, is that the feeling you get as well? Is that from a prioritization standpoint, since they're adding more in these two areas, that they're not as expecting the rigor out of art? Or where's art falling as it relates to reading and science? So,
we're going to be real honest, it's more important for you to read than it is for you to draw. Valid. But all of the stuff that a lot of the pushes they made for art, they started and approved last year. So it sounds like they're throwing a lot of reading stuff at it right now because they've already made those movements in art prior. I mean, again, yes, technically at the end of the day, we want to make sure our kids can read 100%. However, giving our kids that art experience is still really valuable. We have a lot of kids that are going to excel. We have a fantastic art program. I don't know if you guys know, but we have a great art program here. And we want to keep fostering that in kids. I feel like they're equally valid as somebody who also was like one class away from minoring in art. Like, I am a very big component and pusher of, like, I want to see kids doing art.
Sure.
And again, it sounds like it's a lot now because they approved all the things for art last year and really made a big push last year within the arts. And then this year it's reading. It also kind of aligns more effectively with when the new sets of standards need to roll out, because we need to implement the new set of art standards this 23-24 school year. So they approved it last year knowing that, like, it's all got to be in this year. These ones, I think the final draft, I don't know if they voted on it yet. I know they are definitely written for the ELA, but I don't remember if they've already voted on it or if they vote on it this next season. It sounded like everybody was in agreement with having our media specialists work at the secondary level in some capacity, which I think would be phenomenal. One of the suggestions was, well, why don't we just adjust her schedule so that she can do that? We can't do that without taking away prep time for our elementary staff. So right now, if I'm in first grade, I go to the media center so that my teacher can have prep while I am at the media center. So our media specialist isn't like bogged down by elementary kids because we're just scheduling them in here a lot. It's because that's where they go so their teacher can have prep. So it's not just like an arbitrary, we just want them to go to the library 3 days a week. It's, they have to go here so that their teacher can get prep. So we need some place for them to go. And ultimately, this art position is where they would be going. Like, instead of going to the library, we're gonna send them to art, which is how we're gonna free up some of our media specialists' time. There were questions about like, what would our media specialist be doing if we freed up this time for her? Again, support secondary teachers, research, writing is another big one. Like, teaching our kids to write and write effectively is something that our ELA teachers have been asking for additional support in. Still do book checkouts. I think my office is this one right here. I've seen the 7th grade class maybe twice, and I have never seen anybody above that. Occasionally Crockett brings her kids down, I guess. But like, they're not down here frequently. Opening this up by having those kids go to art instead of coming here would give them more opportunity to be in the space and to utilize the space and to check out books and to keep pushing that like reading for pleasure and enjoyment and those sort of things. And then she could help with the books.
That's my fault.
She could help. I know we have book studies and like book reading groups within the secondary ELA classes, so she could definitely help with that. Another thing that our media specialist herself actually was talking about is curating our library. So she ran whatever the magical report is they run about libraries, I don't know. The average copyright date for all of our nonfiction collection is 2005, which is a little alarming, and our fiction section is 2009. Now, it's not that she isn't ordering books, but a lot of the stuff she's ordering is like replacing damaged things because she doesn't really have time to go in and like, okay, I'm going through this entire section of books on hippopotamuses. I'm gonna pull the ones that aren't relevant anymore and then get new, better, more updated stuff in. She just doesn't have the time with as much as she has the elementary in here. So this would open up some of that time for her to do some of that like library, just maintenance of the library and our literature collection. And then the last thing, she's still gonna be doing book checkouts and library time with the elementary. It would just look different, with the goal being to just grow a love of reading for our kids versus like having a very structured, like, you will do a thing and we will come down here and there will be a stuff, like, what do you wanna read about? Let's go find something. What do you want? What do you enjoy? Let's go find that. It's really would be her focus then with her, the time that she has with our elementary kids. Question?
Any questions on this slide?
So high school using media center, I mean, how much does it get used now? What's the future of high school and media centers and books and checkout? I mean,
Well, right now they use it, I'm gonna arbitrarily guess because I don't actually know, I'm gonna say 1% of the time, mostly because there's class being taught in here. Right, like Kim has a class, so if she's teaching a group of 3rd graders, and the 3rd graders are usually in this table, right? So she's teaching 3rd grade here, I'm not gonna bring down 25 8th graders and be like, hey, go find a book. You know, like, that's just asking for chaos, you know what I mean? So not having as many classes in here automatically opens up that space and time for them to be able to come down. I can tell you, your high school staff wants to bring their kids down here. That was one of the first things that was said to me when I started, was like, are we gonna have time to actually come to the media center? They wanna be able to bring their kids in here, but because it's a classroom and because there's constantly instruction happening in here, they don't have the opportunity to do that. And so I'm not gonna say I will guarantee it will be used more, but I will very strongly lean into the statement that our secondary staff will definitely use it more. They want to be in here. They want to have the opportunity for their kids. And let's be honest, it's kind of a nice change of space for our secondary kids too. Like, hey, we're gonna work on a presentation about whales. I don't know, everybody come down here, find a space, work with your group, versus constantly being up in the classroom. Like, we want this space to be an area of active learning versus, like, we gotta be really quiet when we're in here because there's a class.
and you're probably in a position to help make that happen.
Absolutely.
With teachers,
Yes,
you
yeah,
know, to.
and it would be a very easy sell. especially at the secondary level. Like I said, they are craving being able to bring their kids down here because they also want their kids to read for pleasure, right? Like, yeah, we all have the, like, here's your required reading list and we're going to do the thing, but they also just want their kids to read and have access to the books that are here and be able to do that. And
So we would not allow them to bring their phones into this space?
I
then?
mean, in theory, they aren't allowed to have their phones at all because we have a no cell phone policy,
In
so.
the media center or in the high school or in the secondary, or what do you mean by
I
that?
think it's secondary, right? Our secondary is a no, they shouldn't be on their phones or have their phones. They have a little like pocket system they're supposed to keep their phones in. When you walk in and you're number 12 and you put your
Yeah.
phone in number 12, like that sort of system is what is currently in place at the secondary level. The fidelity with which is I'm not gonna speak on that. We do a great job. Nobody has their phones. But ultimately, that would be the goal. And I think some of that too, especially in this space, would just be setting those expectations of what is that time for. Okay, you found your book, now read your book. Good. You know what I mean? Versus like, oh, you found your book, now you can sit on your phone.
Well, exactly.
You know,
I mean,
and that
again,
is the
not-
thing,
Not
right?
excited about just opening up more opportunities for,
Correct. And that is part of classroom management and setting those expectations of the space early, which, is something, those are very good discussions to have with our teachers and and with Kim as well, because she would still be in here in theory.
Yeah.
And just setting expectations, holding
Right.
our kids to,
I know,
that bar.
easier said than done.
it's easier said than done, absolutely, but you hold to it, just make it through the tantrum phase, then it's good. We're good from there, so, yeah. I know there was a concern about funding. I'm just gonna bring back up that we're getting $40,000 from the state for a media specialist. This is also part of, I think it's directly in the READ Act, like it's another component of that. So that will cover a decent chunk of our media specialist salary. When we looked at the breakdown, in order to cover the media specialist and this art teacher position, it will cost the district roughly what it would cost for 1.3 FTEs, just because we're getting that chunk of money in from the state. So we're getting a good chunk of it. Yeah, I just know that one. Questions on that one? There's not really a whole lot more for me to talk about. Okay, other districts, this was a big one. Like, what is everybody else around us doing? So the day after your last meeting, I mass emailed the people, mostly it was other curriculum directors that are in the cohort that I'm part of through SCSC, and some of the principals in the surrounding areas, like, what are you doing? So these I just copy pasted from their email responses. So everybody, so Waseca, Cleveland, NRHEG, St. Clair, New Ulm, and Central Public Schools all have some form of additional teacher that is teaching the arts standards, whether that is a standalone art teacher, whether that is a STEAM or STEM teacher, they all have at least one additional person focusing on those. I did also reach out to USC and WEM. Neither of them got back to me. I sent out a follow-up again last week of like, hey, can you just maybe? And still haven't heard back from them. So those two I haven't heard from, but these were all the ones that got back to me and kind of what they're doing. Yeah.
So just to clarify, nobody said they did not have art or STEAM.
Correct. So the closest thing to a we do not have art would be NRHEG and Central, where they're using a STEAM teacher to teach a large chunk of those art standards. There may be a couple art standards that their teachers in-house are teaching, but they have a standalone specific STEAM teacher. So they have an additional person on staff. So those are our closest to like, we don't have art. That's the closest as far as what I got for responses. Okay, other things to consider. This is my last slide, and then I'll stop talking. Currently, we're out of compliance with the state requirement, which is kind of a big one in my realm of like making sure we're doing what we're supposed to. At the elementary level, we are required to offer 3, and we have to meet all the standards in 2 of the arts areas. So you'll see the 5 arts areas we have listed there. Currently, we meet all the standards in music because every kid goes to music every other day at this point. Our other one that would count as our third is PE because there is a dance unit in PE. However, our PE curriculum aligns with the national PE standards because there aren't like specific state ones. They're just like, yeah, use the national ones. Our current PE unit aligns with the national PE standards, which are different than the arts dance standards. There's a lot of overlap, right? I can move my body in rhythm with the music. That's found in both. I can do a movement with my hands above my head. That's found in both. However, in the arts PE standards, there is a large component of things like I can identify culturally relevant dance to my family. I can discuss the history of dance in different cultures. I can use my body to move to interpret how I am feeling today. So the arts dance standards are very, well, I'm going to say are artsier. And the PE dance standards are very much like I can clap my hands above my head. I can walk in place for 4 counts. And those are also in the art dance standards, which is why we can count it as one of the 3 we're offering. But we don't have another one of those where we are hitting all the standards, which is where this whole visual arts position is coming from. That would cover all the standards of the visual arts. So we would have all the standards for visual arts, we would have all the standards for music, and then our third offering is would technically be dance as part of PE. So that's kind of where we are with that. We want to make sure we're providing similar opportunities for our students as the districts around us. Like I showed, we have most of the districts around us, everybody who got back to me anyway, has something. So we want to make sure that we are doing that. We want to create well-rounded students. Again, I'm a huge proponent of the arts, so arts. Give students access to knowledgeable art instructors. Students gain skills that they will use at the secondary art level. This is kind of a big one that I don't think we necessarily think of, right? We have such a fantastic secondary arts program, but if our kids already came in knowing how to do line and perspective, the level we could push our secondary arts students then automatically increases, right? Because our kids come in knowing the color wheel. They come in knowing that yellow and blue make green. That's not something they have to be taught in painting 1. They come in with that skill, so now painting 1 can look a little more like a painting 2. And we can just keep pushing those kids even further. And then the last thing is the possibility of expanding into a STEAM or STEM in the future. So once we get like our arts program solidified, maybe instead of being every other day art and every other day music, we do music twice a week, art twice a week, STEAM once a week. And that becomes the kids' rotation, where they start getting that experience, as long as we're not cutting into the time that it takes for us to make sure we're hitting all those art standards. But those are things that we can then kind of loop in with this art position moving forward in the future, which I would love to see as a science person. Try and bring that back eventually and give those kids those experiences.
And just to clarify, this position could also someday potentially bring in like media arts to.
Correct. Yep.
You know.
And that, I think you would probably see a little more of that, again, if we added a little bit of that STEAM STEM to it. Media arts within arts is things like graphic design and, TV and broadcasting and like those sort of things fall under the media arts umbrella. And depending on who we get in, absolutely. Our new secondary art teacher will be teaching graphic design next year because he has a background in that. So that'll count towards arts credits now next year, which will be awesome. So.
Any questions? All right. If not, go ahead, sorry.
Have we backfilled Tim James?
It's already filled.
Yes.
Dale Compton is his name. He's a veteran teacher from Loyola.
So Jeremy, what you talked about as far as outsourcing payroll, adding more HR, so your vision then is you don't envision adding other positions for the 23-24 school year at this time?
If we can outsource it, no. And I'm hoping that there's an offset. And what I mean by that is knowing how we're how our budget for our business manager position has changed with Wendy moving into that position. We, because she doesn't have the experience Matt does, it saves the district a significant amount of money on top of salary. So the hope is that that significant amount offsets a large portion of what the payroll would be.
Sure.
We
I
just
get
don't
that.
have that exact number yet. So are we saying
Yeah, I'm.
adding a $60,000 position? No, I'm not looking at that.
Okay.
Is it a possibility of $10,000?
Sure. I'm
Over
not-
what?
Yep, I'm not worried
That's a
about that. I'm just,
possibility.
again, if we're gonna need a coordinator and an HR person, that was what I was really trying to get at.
Right,
And
But-
right now you have a vision that you can fulfill the HR that was identified through your research process. Right now you have a vision that we won't add a specific person just for HR. You're gonna roll
Right.
that into the coordinator, outsource payroll, and again, if that adds 10, 20,000, that's not what I'm,
right.
No
That's,
concern
that's
about
my
that.
vision, that's my vision behind it. And in our discussion today is, if we don't outsource payroll, then it's two people to take that position. If we outsource payroll, we can do it with one person.
sure.
So, yes,
And-
that's exactly
And in theory, how many retirements did we have?
3.
In theory, you're not backfilling them at the same cost, so you're saving money
Correct.
there
Right.
too.
Yes,
Right. Good point.
yep. And Matt's got all of that in the budget coming up here.
Okay.
Any other questions? If not, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the addition of the elementary art teacher.
That's Katie Cahill. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
That's Joni Olson. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Casey.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Number 9, new business. Approval of the fiscal year 2024 preliminary budget.
Matt, this is you.
Last one.
Turn on my mic.
Can I go to marching band? Sorry, guys, I'm going to marching band.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I'm so excited. Thank you so much.
Have a good night.
Alright. So, kind of, going in here, we've talked about this before with the budget assumptions, but, obviously our student count and what we set enrollment at really drives the revenue side of the budget, so these are the numbers we landed on. That 660, translates when when you factor in the student weighting, you get up to 727, so that is the number we used. How that shakes out is it kind of feeds it mainly into that top row, that basic formula. This does include the 4% the legislature gave us now. At the finance committee, it wasn't in there yet, but I've made some tweaks to this. So that's there. Now you might say, why isn't it 4% higher than last year? But obviously student count driven as well as some other factors. Basic skills, another one that should be jumping out to you if you kind of scroll through this. So that is our compensatory, which is based on our free and reduced, which has been traditionally right around probably 200,000, I would say, pre-COVID. And then you can see what it was for the current year, that 88,000. So getting that back up to kind of where it was, plus with the Medicare eligibility, it's really jumped up here. And thankfully, the way the legislature set us up, this is a hold harmless. So we should be seeing kind of this 330,000 figure for at least the next couple of years before they go to the new formula. So good things there. One change though to basic skills, which I don't know, I haven't dug into it enough to know, but before it used to be whatever dollars generated per site was, 50% of that had to stay with the site. Now it's up to 80. So if the high school is generating X amount of dollars of that 330, you know, before basic skills, really, we used to kind of pay for some of our kindergarten staff, just, you know, kind of argued that was the way to get everybody started on a good foot if we were helping kindergarten, so might have to look at some coding, but most of that's just reclassing. Special ed, the revenue there is, the increase is due to that cross subsidy aid. So there was one report that I normally use that hasn't been updated yet with all the legislature and all the movement around. So I did warn Wendy to kind of keep an eye on that number as that report does become available, and just kind of double check and make sure it's still a good estimate. But that is the increase we were supposed to see according to some of the state runs that the various organizations kicked out. Federal, you can see that's way down, and that's as we've used up our COVID dollars, we're kind of petering out there on some of those. And then, you know, the levy's up, but that was kind of part of what we set it at. So in the end, we're seeing our initial revenue budget here of about 10.3, which is 5% more than last year. Just some notes. So things that aren't in the budget, just because I don't have a code for them yet, are those top two there. So that's another 80,000. Once again, the menstrual products, I don't have a code yet, so that's another. It's only $1,500. And then the unemployment. Initially, that's going to be in its own object code as the state funding exists, because if you put it where every staff was, it would create a double dip. You know, if we code them to special ed, we'd be getting special ed funding and this additional funding, so, you know, those will move around. So once again, I don't know that exact coding yet, so I did not put that in the budget. Now with the unemployment, as you'll see, it would be an offset, so it would increase revenue, but expenses would go right along with it, dollar for dollar. So it's not going to be, you know, additional dollars like as far as the bottom line goes on that one. But all in all, the items that aren't in there is about another 200,000 or 180,000. So had that been in there, we would have been about 10.5. Another thing here is we're getting more ADSIS funding. We got approved to add the behavior interventionist. So that increases our FTE in that program to 2.0. Now ADSIS is kind of buried into special ed, but once again, that not knowing exactly those figures, that's not in the budget right now as well.
Question.
Sure.
For the unemployment, did we figure out if it's set up like it normally is for unemployment, where they have to seek employment during their unemployed time?
Yes, they are supposed to, you know, answer all of Deed's questions. Now, if someone says no, they kind of said in some of those webinars, that doesn't necessarily mean they're not going to receive unemployment. They just have to answer to those questions. So, and now hearing some of these webinars that's been on it, it's pretty much Deed's call. Like, schools don't control it, employees don't control it. Deed's just like, hey, this is unemployment like it's always been. This is nothing new for us. It's just a new, you know, I guess, group of people that have become suddenly eligible. So how that all shakes out, I'm not exactly sure, but, you know, that is one of the questions that they'll be asked. So. So expenditure side, this first wave will kind of slice up the budget is by object code. So as you can see, it's kind of salaries, benefits, supplies, things like that. So in the end, some areas went up and down, but you know, capital's way down as we get away from, you know, we had the energy savings that we did out of our own pocket and some of the Windows stuff. So that's down because of that. But, you know, then of course salaries and benefits and some of those purchase services are up. But in the end, our budget's about the same as it was in 2023. Kind of some of the notes on that as well. So once again, that 100,000 not in here for unemployment. There's some new programs, so safe and sick time is out there, as well as, you know, we had some discussions here as far as, so we're getting the $1,500 for the menstrual products, but exactly the cost of that, you know, from how we're going to dispense it to how much you know, product we have to have on hand, so that's also not in the budget. We'll see how that goes as the year shapes out. And then, of course, negotiations, we don't know exactly where people are gonna settle at. Now, the budget does have a built-in kind of settlement, kind of averaged out to what we've done in the past, but of course, subject to change. And then the behavior interventionist, we obviously need to post and get that position hired, so we don't have that in here yet. And then there was some discussions about adding pairs or adding teachers, and just to kind of ballpark that, a new teacher is gonna be approximately that 65 to 70, and a new pair will be about 25,000, and then on top of that, whatever the employment they might earn, depending on how that goes. So just some notes there. Another just breakdown here on salaries as we get into the various levels, so you can see teachers. One thing we had, and it's good, we obviously encourage it, but we had several lane changes, what we're up to, like 14 or 15 lane changes. So that's in there. And then, like I said, there is an estimated settlement, and then the additional FTE as well. So art was in the budget, and the new FIAD, we're up one FIAD teacher. So all that works out to that kind of 12.8%. Admin's flat now, as we've updated for some of the changes here, and then the other is up a little bit, but once again, that's kind of that average settlement like I talked about there. So another way to slice up the budget here is by program code, is what it's called, so you can see the various areas that we're getting into. So if you want to look at really like what are we here to do, we're here to provide regular instruction, instructional support, pupil support, and vocational. And all, I guess vocational's not, but most of those areas are where we're seeing the increases at. And then you can see like admin's flat. That might change with some of this we've talked about, but for right now, what's in the budget is flat. And then once again, with capital being down, obviously that's why sites and buildings is also down as well. So looking in overall, we pretty much have kind of a flat budget here, but another, just note, we still have the $200,000 under levy here, and we're still kind of at it's not super conservative this year. We've definitely been more conservative in the past, but we're still maybe a couple students short, which, now that the formula's increasing, every time that you are undercounting, you're leaving probably about 10,000 or so on the table. So just trying to note that. As we go in, we've always talked about this fund balance policy. So the projected fund balance we were bringing into 2024 is that kind of 3.8 there. We back off the restrictions to get to kind of that unassigned, or unrestricted, is the term for that, so that 3.6. And then the budget we're looking at right now is with that 10 million, take 25% of that, and you can see we're still sitting at about $1 million over our policy. So pretty favorable position, gives us some flexibility there.
And again, that 25% is something that we as a board set on.
Yes.
Legally, MDE would require us to just be balanced.
I don't know if,
Do we
there's
have to have a
recommendations, I don't know if there's a legal number. It's definitely district, dependent. And also if you break your own policy, it's not enforced by any outside organization. I think that policy partly was set, with the dark days here of being an SOD and everything.
Mhm.
Once we had a balance, we were like, okay, let's hold on to it. So, I'd say it's one of the higher policies, but once again,
We
it's
kind of
something to
wanted
have.
a higher one for,
Right.
how they recommend you have 6 months worth of your income. I
Right.
would
Yep.
think schools should follow the same. And, if we have, we should try and do that. So I think that was kind of why we landed on the 25% way back when.
Yep, but we could change that to 30 or 20.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we could,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, it's our own policy. Now,
Mhm.
of course, if your fund balance gets too low, where you're hitting against that SOD threshold, that's when the state steps in.
Yeah.
That's when they come in and say, okay, we gotta figure something out here. But thankfully,
So we're a million over that, 25%?
Yes.
so it's kind of a, in the past, let's say, 3 years ago, our expenditures were probably only 9 million, or 8.5. So, as we spend more, as our budget's growing, just kind of naturally, that amount we have for the policy is growing, but we seem to kind of maintaining. But I mean, I think doing the project, we were almost like 2 million to the good over this. So
Yeah, we're kind of slowly dwindling that
Right.
down to
Yeah.
the 25%.
definitely nothing to be concerned. But I think with the under levying and paying for it, ourselves, we're trying to be good stewards, but also like, hey, we have this, available capital. Let's do something logical with it. So trying to, do the best we can with that. So that's the general fund that I have right now. Like I said, the budget is sort of still in that preliminary stage as all those things shake out, I noted, but I think it's a good enough framework to kind of go off of going forward. So then when we bring in the other funds, because in order to spend a cent in any fund, this is what we're doing. We're approving a budget so that as we go into next year, we have the authority to spend, so food service, I kind of took Taher's proposal and then tweaked for some of our things, because there are dollars that we get as well as that we spend that aren't part of Taher's kind of formulation. So, so the one thing is that budget that Taher gave us was having that $40,000 benefit or whatever positive balance that we told them to spend down. So maybe that will change, but overall, and then community service. Right now, I'd say there's some conservatism going on as well, with as far as showing the one deficit balance we have here. But I think we're overstating some of the expenses, understating the revenue, as well as this was the first year we under levied as far as the ECFE levy, which was about 30,000. So had that been back in there, we would have been sitting about good. As well as community ed has grown a fund balance, so it's not necessarily look at it. I'm not concerned. I'm not alarmed about it being in the deficit here. I think we did some things with salaries to kind of help out. So something to watch. Obviously that's not a trend we want to kind of stay on top of, but the capital project fund, we are getting interest income, so that's that 30,000. But then technically we should be done as far as the project goes. Now, if the election, which we'll talk about here soon, goes favorably, obviously there'll be expenditures. The timing of those, I guess I'm not exactly sure of. So right now I just left it at 0. But as you revise the budget, you can obviously look into that. And then the debt service fund is just operating as it should. We get a little bit more revenue than we're spending because that's how the whole thing's set up. So, but I will say that now that we're in year 2 of paying the debt, it's definitely ramped up. I think it was 250,000 was our principal payment on the new debt. Now it's 325. So we're kind of getting into those larger payments, and as you can see, the levy increased accordingly. But with that, I'll leave this slide here. The next slide is just questions, but this might be more to look at if anyone does.
You said we'll have expenses with the election, obviously. Are you saying that's coming out of the capital project fund?
So I haven't answered this question fully. Wendy did ask me the other day. If the election goes through, we're saying, can we use these funds for other purposes? I mean, technically, if we do the roof, that's a project, so you could run it out of the capital project fund. It just might not be under LTFM, or if it is. So there's some coding that has to be figured out, but I think it would still be a capital project, for spending $1 million on the roof. But that's something I told Wendy she might have to talk to the auditors about and get figured out exactly how that should be handled.
But the election expenses themselves, was part of the
Oh,
general, right?
No, I mean, if the election is approved, then we'll have like
Right.
the roof expenses.
Right,
The-
okay.
The election expenses, I mean, I guess you could put against those project funds.
Oh, okay, I didn't know if you could do that or not.
Yeah. That's another good question for the auditors that I would probably talk to them about. Cause we did talk to the county, you know, running some of the, they had a contract, I forget the exact terms. I think it was not to exceed like $3,000 was the language on there, just, you know, with getting some of the voting machines and all that. But,
That's all it'll cost to run it?
well, just from their side of things, I'm sure we'll have other costs. We have to do the notices.
So I was thinking it was what, about 10,000 we had figured at one time to have a special election?
I'd have to find my email.
And that could have been years ago too, when we talked about it.
Well, yeah,
but-
there's the election judges and that type of thing, but as far as the county had an additional contract just of providing some of those, like helping with the ballots and all that.
Okay.
And,
Yeah, I'm not sure that included like the cost of the ballots. I think it was just the
right,
county services. So we'd have to have ballots printed and pay election judges and,
Okay.
so, yeah, I mean, I suppose it could go up to 10,000.
yeah. We had, also a kind of a document provided by Ehlers that was also, came with the resolution that has like a big timeline of when stuff needs to be done, so
Okay.
that was helpful.
And as for the other expenses, you felt you overestimated the expenses and underestimated the revenue and everything, that I
Right.
feel like this is pretty good.
Yeah, kind of a
Conservative
typical
budget.
MO. I mean,
Yeah.
I sit down kind of in the March time frame with everybody that kind of controls budget, you know, their area, and kind of run through it and say, here's what we got. You know, normally we assume a little bit of just natural growth and,
Right.
but if they have a reason, you know, for example, Paul, I'm like, hey, how many section games are we hosting? Or, you know, we'll adjust for that. You know, various things like that. So if there's a reason to do it greater than this slight percentage we have built in, we'll obviously do that. But other than that, we're kind of just building in that little bit of growth.
Well, and I know there's still a lot of unknowns, but if you felt like you did pretty conservatively, I'm okay with it. I don't have any other questions.
And you don't have any recommendation to accelerate debt payments? You know, because you are projecting another, 20, another 10% even over the 25%.
Right.
So why not pay down debt faster than, I mean, you kind of brought that up at the last
Right.
meeting.
Well, so right now, and maybe we can talk about it at the same time, but with the election, our idea is we're gonna have like 1.7, 1.8 million left. So 650,000 of it will be paying off the current bond that's callable. And there's another bond we have, but it's not callable yet. So we can't do any type of advance payments without, kind of breaching the agreement we have with bondholders
Sure.
for that. But I think, yeah, so paying off the 14A bond, I think is a smart call. And then, maybe in 2029 or whenever that call date is, you can definitely look into that. I know there's another mechanism you can use, and normally they do kind of analyze it every once in a while, but you can do what's known as an advance refunding. So basically you issue a bond at a lower interest rate than that old bond, but since the call date hasn't happened yet, it just sits in escrow until the call date, but then you use the new proceeds to pay the old proceeds, so it's kind of a
Right.
nifty way. But like I said, normally they do that analysis and kind of let us know, if it's only gonna save you $5,000, but it's, got $50,000 cost of issuance, they're not gonna recommend it.
And who's they?
Oh, well, we used to have Baker Tilly, now we have Ehlers. or Ellers, sorry,
audit-
it's
are they our
AHLER.
auditors?
What's that?
Are they our auditors?
No, they're,
Just our-
financial advisors,
Okay.
I guess you'd call them.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions on that? All right, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
That's Tim Burke. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
That's Katie Cahill. Motion to approve and second for the fiscal year 2024 preliminary budget. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carries 4-0. All right, nine,
Should be 9.
yeah, I see that. 9B, approve resolution for membership to the MSHSL for 23-24. Do we have to watch the video?
No, that's my
Mhm.
question to the
Yeah.
board, is if, this is, every year we sign a resolution to be part of the Minnesota State High School League. This year, it's been a heated topic at some school board meetings. It hasn't been at any of ours. They did send a video out for us to watch. If we choose to watch it prior to approving this resolution, we can watch it if you want. It's about 6.5 minutes long. If you're okay with not watching it, you can go ahead with approving the resolution.
Did everybody watch it? I watched it already.
I watched
Okay.
it.
They basically are just saying what they promote, like they're more than just numbers. Like they're there to help kids learn and become better citizens in life and blah, blah, blah. So knowing that we kind of have, that we have Kevin leaving, soon, right? You're gonna have to get going soon.
Yeah, I'd like to, but
Do you want to watch the video or
Nope.
do you, okay.
I just want to hear
Yeah.
if Jeremy's recommending that we approve
My
this.
recommendation is that we continue to be part of
That's
the
what I need to
Minnesota
hear.
State
Okay.
High School League.
So
Okay,
moved. I make
perfect.
a motion to approve that.
All right, Kevin Bourne, motion, do we have a second?
A second.
That's Tim Burke. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carries 4-0.
Is it a resolution though?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Good call.
Let's see. Burke,
Yes.
Bourne,
Yes.
Olson, Cahill,
Yes.
Size.
Yes. Motion passes 4-0. All right, C, approve resolution relating to changing the authorized use of bond proceeds and calling an election thereon.
So this is the language that came from Ellers about, for a ballot question, going through everything to run an election in the fall, to be able to use that, the money that was not spent on the project as we feel fit. Like Matt said, possibly paying off a bond, and the other thing would be looking at replacing roofs that need to be replaced.
Just remind me how much we're talking about.
1.7 to 1.8 million. We're still waiting to hear that final number.
Right.
And we'll do more than just this to speak to the community about, some of the things that we've done, how we've under levied the last couple of years and stuff, so they
Right.
understand. Because obviously this says it will increase our taxes, so.
Right. Yeah,
So we're gonna have to-
unfortunately, that's part of the deal.
Yeah.
I mean, so really it's, if we gave it back as debt excess, yes, they would see lower taxes because it would reduce the levy ask on the debt service side. However, if you're talking about equalization, then, that fourth year is gonna be very painful. And then on top of that, we're probably gonna have to address the roof anyways, so if we then have to issue debt for that, I mean, so I think this is kind of the fiscally responsible way to go about it, but
Okay.
So if it doesn't pass, what would happen to that 1.7?
we have to return it to the state and it goes into our levy calc as debt excess. So basically, they look at your fund balance, and so, well, actually, let me back up 1 second. So when you close a project, so right now, if you've heard me say Fund 6 or the Capital Project Fund,
Yep,
that cannot transfer to any fund except for the debt service fund.
right.
You can't put it in the general fund, yeah, any of that. So we put it in the debt service fund, then we do the annual audit, we get to the end, they're gonna see that fund balance is gonna be, you know, whatever it is. And they know what our bond payments need to be, so then just organically they look and they say, hey, you have too much fund balance, we're gonna reduce your levy because of that. Well, because we're talking large numbers, you know, we're not gonna have a levy then of debt service for probably, like I said, 3 years, I think it will be almost zero. And then that fourth year, it'll pretty much all be back. So, but that's, you know, if it was a smaller amount, like if we were talking 50,000, you know, that's just part of the deal. We're saying, hey, taxpayers, we did better than we thought. We're giving you a little break, you know. But I think it's just because it was such a large amount that this is the reason we're going here.
Any other questions?
So that money could not be used for a different capital project.
The only avenue of spending that money is on project involving indoor air quality, because we issued it under the indoor air quality kind of envelope of LTFM. So,
Or approval from the taxpayers?
right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, in order to do anything other than indoor air quality, we have to go out for vote. Even if you wanted to use other health and safety categories, we'd still have to go out to vote, according to Sarah Miller. Now, sometimes our bond council didn't have the same opinion, but since the state's ultimately the ones that have to assign it, we kind of had to listen to them. But
And did we have to originally tie it that tightly? We couldn't have said, or other projects as deemed necessary?
No.
Did we have to get it so tight as the indoor air quality project?
well, in order to
That's how we
get
got
the
approved.
bond approval without it going out for voter approval at the time, yeah.
We did. Very
Yeah.
good.
Good questions.
So what is the recommendation and what are you looking for?
My recommendation is that we move forward to call for the election.
I asked the voters
Ask
if
them
they'll allow us
if they'll allow
to
us to use the
this
money
for
The roof.
as we see fit.
as we see fit.
Okay.
Did
Oh.
that, but that thing actually said the roof, right? Didn't it, on the,
I didn't.
I think it says, it was kind of like as an example. I don't think
Oh.
that's binding in any
oh, okay.
manner.
Okay, so we can use it as to, we don't have to be specific.
I'm just making sure I read the exact wording, but I thought the way he had worded it.
General obligation facility maintenance bonds.
Oh, it does say, well,
Up on top, I thought it said something.
fund the
about-
acquisition and betterment of school sites and city, including the construction of a new roof to the school building. So it does have specific examples in here, but I believe if we wanted to, we could tweak it. I don't know if that would be a motion to say, you know, approve with the, modification if we wanted that not in there. I
If
guess
we're-
that's always been the examples we've used when we talked about this.
Okay, if we're allowed to say whatever we deem fit, that's probably the better thing to say. And then,
Right.
Meg.
and then we,
What is this final back?
General
yeah,
obligation facility maintenance bond.
Right. I would want to move forward with the ability to change this yet and not agreeing, you know, if we make a motion, I don't want to agree that it has to be written
that wording.
exactly
yeah.
like that.
It's not the final document.
Because I think I'd have some suggestions on perhaps how we would tweak that,
Yep.
if that's all right. So
Right.
I would make the motion to approve, going out for the vote with the ability to still finalize
The verbiage.
the verbiage of the, what the election, whatever you call that, sorry. I don't have a good word for it.
No, that-
Al- Alternatively, I just wanted to point out, I'm trying to get my ducks in a row here. But, so, part of why we're having this meeting is I just wanted this wrapped up before I left. But technically, we do not have to call the election until August 25th. So if you wanted to just table it, get the wording how you want, then you could go back in July and approve it.
So,
So we would postpone it indefinitely.
yeah, so we have to do that, because we have to approve the actual verbiage, is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, I guess when I talked to, I was talking to, his name's Aaron at Ellers, but so Peter Martin is the gentleman that actually drafted this all. He works for Kennedy and Graven. So, I don't know, maybe,
Just
and once again,
postpone
if
it
we
to be
approve it
safe.
with ability to modify, maybe that gives you flexibility, but, I guess maybe getting his opinion on that, on should you have specific examples, should you not, is it better, or do you need to? I guess I don't have those answers for you today, but,
So I guess my recommendation would be that we postpone it indefinitely,
Okay,
right.
get the language the way we want it, and then
and then
move
do
on.
it, as long as we do it by August,
Yes.
whatever date you
Right.
just said.
25th, you said?
Yeah, yeah, I think it's, what is it, 75 days before the election
Okay,
is the,
okay, so are you,
Do you
Did you-
want that motion?
did you make, you,
I
did
did
you
not make a
rescind? Oh, you
motion.
didn't make a okay. All right, do we have a motion then for, postponing indefinitely, I guess? Yeah.
Yes,
Okay,
so
That's-
moved.
Kevin Bourne, do we have a second?
Second.
That's Tim Burke. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay.
That's a resolution,
Oh, yeah, I keep doing it.
but
Need
we don't.
Another
Postpone it
resolution.
indefinitely?
Postpone
To
it, do we have
postpone it
to?
indefinitely?
I guess I don't know.
We can do a
Just do
roll
it
call
just to
for
be-
the record,
just to be
yeah.
safe.
Sure, Burke,
Sure.
Yep,
Yes.
Bourne.
Yes.
Cahill.
Yes.
Size.
yes. Motion passes 4-0. All right, 9D, approve resolution relating to the approval of Independent School District Number 2835, long-term facilities maintenance plan, revenue expenditures, and statement of assurances.
Alright, so normally we do this in July, but once again, just trying to help out before I head over to Wasika. So I moved it up here a month. But basically, this is pretty boilerplate at this point. So first, we have the resolution just saying, we're gonna use it according to all the state's rules, regulations, whatever have you. Now, the 3 documents that are attached here, all come from the state. The revenue projection, I was hoping legislature was gonna increase the amount, but it unfortunately did not. So we get $380, and there's a formula with like average building age and whatever. But, if you remember when we did the, the athletic complex, we borrowed against some of that 380. So when we get done with that bond, we only have about 100,000 left. So when we set up our expenditure plan, which is pretty much the main part of this that you're looking at, we only have so much to spend. And some of the, kind of that top section or that category 1, and I'm sorry it's so small, but I tried to put the Google Sheet in here and it said it was too large. So I didn't really know how to attach it, but this is kind of a larger document with the 10 columns. But, that top kind of 6 rows here are pretty much like standard, like kind of maintenance-y. Some of it comes from the co-op, some of it's like our, checking our fire, alarm systems and that kind of thing. But obviously every year it kind of adds up. The project, so that 3.4 million there so that line is just the project. You can see that's under health and safety projects costing $100,000 or more, which is the kind of the tool we use to get those bonds issued. So that's the second year of expense. Once again, the project should be done in theory by the end of this year. Even if we have bills going out in July, they should be relating to this year. So I don't anticipate any expenditures in 2024. You're on the second page. I'd go back to the first page. But, and then the bottom, so we've had kind of the resurfacing the blacktop kind of on the, it was maybe gonna be this year, it was maybe gonna be next year, so trying to capture that. But those are kind of the bigger ones we have as far as that sites projects. And then we had like the track resurfacing we've talked about. So some of those are in here, but kind of the new thing they added with this, if you go to the third page, oh, it's not in here, is it?
No, there's only 2
Oh,
pages.
they must have a range when I printed it. They must not grab it. But there's a fund balance portion of this now that's at the bottom. So basically, you know, if you spend what you say you're going to spend, and if you take in what you say you're going to take in, you know, what does your fund balance look like? And it can go negative, but if it does, they want to see that it climbs back out, or that you have a plan in place. You know, if you just keep digging the hole, they're going to kind of talk to you and be like, maybe you need to change your plan. But for us, our plan is keeping us kind of with a light balance. Right now, we actually have about 180,000 we started this year with. So, you know, kind of talking to Mike, with the project going on, you know, we didn't spend as much in the general fund. So, as that rolls on, you let him know we have dollars. So we did stuff like the bleachers. That was part of our way of spending down that fund balance for this year. So we put that under like physical hazards. But at this time, we're talking about years 24 through whatever this goes out to, 34. I thought I was maybe one of those tricky ones where you only had 9, but
That could be.
but anyways, then in another time here, which once again I'm kind of letting Wendy know, but in the fall here, you actually submit, once the audit's done, what your actual expenditures are, and then they'll adjust the levy. So it's kind of set up it's one of those things where you estimate, they set the initial levy, and then they see what happens, and then they adjust it later years. So in the end, we're made kind of whole, but sometimes it takes a while for that to shake out. Like I said, the revenue side is basically just encapsulating that we do have bonds against it. So, and I did check those amounts, but and then lastly, the statement of insurances is just, once again, us letting the state know and kind of affirming it here for that we're gonna follow all the rules. So, yeah, pretty standard at this point if you've seen it from year to year.
Any questions? If not, do we have a motion? Yeah, we still have a motion, a second.
I'll make a motion.
That's Tim Burke. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
That's Katie Cahill. And then Wendy, since it's a resolution.
Bourne,
Yes.
Cahill,
Yes.
Burke,
Yes.
Sice.
Yes. Motion carries 4-0. 10, approve resolution accepting donations with many thanks. I'll read them off here. We have a donation from the University of Minnesota for $230 for Science Club trip expenses. Donation from Arnold's of Mankato for $250 for FFA. Donation from Darren and Mona Fellows for $500 for the welding shop in memory of Richard Sarda. $150 donation from Richard and Connie Hain, for the welding shop in memory of Richard Sarda. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
That's Kevin Bourne. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
That's Tim Burke. And another resolution.
Cahill,
Yes.
Burke,
Yes.
Bourne,
Yes.
Sice.
Yes, motion carries 4-0. Upcoming meetings, July 17th, regular board meeting, followed by the curriculum and instruction meeting that was going to take place tonight, but we moved it. And then August 21st, regular school board meeting. And we are now adjourned at 7:08.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Yep.
waiting, Kevin.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Safe
it.
travels.
Yeah.
Yes.
Drive safe. I know.
You're gonna drive for 9 hours?
Oh, goodness.
Meetings in the morning.
Oh, drive safe, please.
Yes.
Yep, will do.
Right.
Catching up and go.
Cold
Should be
air.
taking the airplane,
You should.
but I think it's flying.
Where are you driving to?
Valentine,